Today I'm showing you step by step how to create this amazing matcha tiramisu cake. I'll walk you through my entire cake design and recipe development process for creating a matcha version of the classic tiramisu cake and how I created this matcha inspired cake design.
My name is Louise and I'm a self-taught cake artist and recipe developer. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the most amazing matcha tiramisu. Unlike a normal tiramisu, this version doesn't contain coffee but instead a lot of matcha. Besides coffee, I kept the main elements from a normal tiramisu with ladyfingers and mascarpone. So here I've turned the classic tiramisu into a modern matcha entremet with many layers, more flavor nuances with a hint of pistachio and also more textures. I'm going to show you the process behind developing this cake recipe and my thoughts behind creating a matcha version of the classic tiramisu. If you want to bake the cake at home, you can find the full recipe here on my website and also via the link in the description box. To make this cake, I'm also going to show you how to master the following techniques: a crumbly matcha biscuit base, delicate homemade ladyfingers, a crunchy matcha pistachio crunch layer, a fudgy matcha and pistachio ganache, a creamy mascarpone cream, an airy matcha and vanilla mousse, and a shiny mirror glaze. I'm going to show you how to make the following layers: matcha biscuit base, matcha and pistachio crunch, matcha and pistachio ganache, ladyfingers soaked in matcha, mascarpone cream, matcha and vanilla mousse, mirror glaze, and chocolate decoration. If you want to learn more about how to make elegant, layered, and delicious entremet cakes, you can now check out my online course, Master Entremet Cakes at Home, where I show you how to create professional quality cakes from start to finish, right from your own kitchen. Inside the course, I teach you my 5-step formula that I use for all my cakes: cake base, crunch, creamy element, mousse, and decoration. You'll also learn how to make 5 of my signature entremet cakes, different glazing techniques, discover recipe development and cake design, and also receive PDF troubleshooting guides and Excel recipe course material, giving you everything you need to start creating your own cakes at home. Okay, let's get started!
To create a modern version of the classic tiramisu, I wanted to add some new elements. A tiramisu typically lacks any crunchy elements, so I wanted to introduce some additional textures to create a more dynamic eating experience. I therefore decided to make a classic biscuit base, but here with a twist of matcha. I make the biscuit base by first blending biscuits into crumbs and then mixing in melted butter, salt, and of course matcha powder. I then spread the biscuit base in a pastry ring, level the surface with a glass, and put the cake in the freezer while preparing the next layer. To elevate the traditional cake, I decided to add a bit of crunch, because as you know, I don't make any cakes just without a little of crunch. I also wanted to add a hint of a different flavor than just matcha, which is why this crunch layer also is with pistachio nuts. I here start out by caramelizing pistachio nuts by melting sugar to a golden caramel before stirring in the nuts. Once the pistachio nuts have cooled off, I chop them into smaller pieces. We then melt white chocolate and mix in pistachio cream, the chopped pistachio nuts, matcha powder, gelatin, and salt. As we here have both gelatin and the caramelized nuts, it really gives the most wonderful crunch. I spread the crunch on top of the biscuit layer, level the layer, and put the cake back in the freezer where it needs to set before we can add the next layer. To add a fudgy texture to the cake, I'm here making my favorite matcha ganache. I'm also adding a bit of pistachio flavor to add a bit more contrast and flavor nuances to the cake. To make the ganache, I start out by melting white chocolate and pistachio cream. The pistachio cream here adds a slightly nutty twist. Then I heat heavy cream, lime juice, just to add a bit of freshness, and matcha powder almost to a boil before pouring it over the white chocolate / pistachio mixture. Lastly, I hand blend the ganache to get a fully creamy consistency. Using an immersion hand blender here is really the key, as it creates a super silky texture and helps emulsify the fats for a smooth finish. The ganache is then poured onto the set crunch layer before I put the cake back in the freezer where the ganache needs to set. As this is a tiramisu inspired cake, we of course need to have ladyfingers in the cake. And if you've never made homemade ladyfingers before, I really urge you to try it because it really makes a difference from the ones you buy, and since this is a matcha tiramisu, we gotta go all the way. I here start out by beating egg whites with a hand mixer until soft peaks form. Then I'm gradually adding sugar to make it into a stiff meringue. In another bowl, I'm mixing egg yolks, sugar, vanilla and salt until the mixture gets a light color and thickens a bit. And now to the important part of mixing in the egg whites. Here we have to be a bit careful not to overmix, as we just only want just to combine, as we don't want to beat the air out of the egg whites, since this will lead to flat ladyfingers. After mixing in the egg whites, I'm adding flour and cornstarch to the dough before piping the ladyfingers on a baking tray with a round pastry tip. Then the ladyfingers needs to bake for 8 to 10 minutes at 175 degrees until lightly golden. Now the most important part is to let the ladyfingers set overnight, as this ensures that they will absorb the matcha mixture. I therefore made these ladyfingers the day before all the other layers. Instead of the classic coffee syrup, I'm here making a matcha syrup instead. I make the syrup by adding boiling water to matcha powder, stirring with a matcha whisk to remove any clumps, and then put it aside so it can cool off. Letting the syrup cool completely is quite important, as a warm syrup can affect the texture of the ladyfingers. The other main element I wanted to keep from the classic tiramisu cake is the mascarpone cream. This will not only encase the ladyfingers, but also bring a light and creamy texture to the cake. The first step is to heat a bit of heavy cream almost to a boil and adding soaked gelatin. While this cools off, I'm whisking egg yolks, sugar and vanilla with a hand mixer until it's light and airy. I then stir in the lukewarm heavy cream with gelatin, add in a lot of mascarpone of course, and whip again until combined. Lastly, I'm adding cold heavy cream, where I continue to whip until medium peaks form to ensure that the cream is stable and not too soft. And then we are ready to assemble the cake. To assemble the cake, I quickly dip ladyfingers in the cold matcha syrup, let it drip off, and place them inside the pastry ring on top of the set ganache. It's important only briefly to soak the ladyfingers, as they absorb liquid very quickly, so I also make sure to let the excess drip off before I place the ladyfingers on the cake. I repeat this until the matcha soaked ladyfingers are covering the full cake. I then sprinkle with matcha powder before I pipe a 1.5 cm thick layer of mascarpone cream on top. To resemble the classic tiramisu, I make yet another layer with matcha soaked ladyfingers, sprinkle with matcha powder, and again apply a 1.5 cm mascarpone layer on top of the cake. Then the cake needs to freeze fully overnight. To encase the cake, adding an airy texture and a flavor that also breaks up the bitter matcha flavor, I'm here making a matcha mousse with vanilla. This light and airy consistency will contrast and complement the other layers in the cake and also act both as a flavor component and a structural element, giving the cake a stable, elegant exterior. I make the mousse by first melting white chocolate and pouring it in a bowl. I then cut the vanilla beans and scrape out the seeds. The next step is to heat heavy cream, vanilla seeds and matcha powder to a boil and whisking in soaked gelatin before pouring the hot mixture over the white chocolate. While it's cooling off, I whip heavy cream to a lightly whipped cream. Whipping the cream just to soft peaks keeps the mousse airy and light, which is important for contrast. I then fold the whipped cream into the matcha/white chocolate mixture. The final mousse has a pastel green color and a light and airy texture. We then pour the mousse in a silicone mold and put in the frozen cake with the mascarpone cream facing downwards. Then the cake needs to freeze fully overnight. Since this is a matcha cake, I wanted to go all in on a green cake design. So I'm here making my go-to mirror glaze that will cover the cake in the most beautiful shiny green glaze. I make this by soaking gelatin, heating sugar, water, heavy cream and glucose syrup almost to a boil before pouring it over white chocolate. Once it's mixed, I add different green coloring pastes to reach the perfect green matcha color. Then the glaze needs to cool to 34 to 35 degrees. I place the fully frozen cake on a baking cooling rack and pour the 34 to 35 degrees hot glaze over the cake. Due to the temperature differences, the glaze will stick and cover the cakes with a beautiful shiny surface. After creating all the cake elements, we're now ready for the final touch, the chocolate decoration. I here had a specific design in mind where I wanted to create some dimension and composition by creating a sort of chocolate tower. So I'm here making different chocolate ribbons in a vibrant green color to match the green color of the glaze. I first put the whitest chocolate ribbon around the cake and then the second whitest chocolate ribbon around the cake. To assemble the top decoration, I first placed the most narrow ribbon on top of the cake, then the second ribbon, the third ribbon, and now the fourth ribbon. Lastly, I decorate the chocolate tower with different flowers to create some contrast in the cake design. And here we have the final cake that I think looks mesmerizing. The vibrant green colors really emphasizes that this is a matcha cake. This cake has such an architectural design that aligns with the structured layers inside, and I really think this is a perfect version of a modern tiramisu turned into a matcha cake.
Oh wow, so good! I am a huge matcha fan, so I thought it would be a fun project to turn the classic tiramisu into a matcha version. So we have a lot of layers with matcha, a hint of pistachio just to have a bit of a contrasting flavor note to give a bit of a twist, but I've kept the classic elements from a tiramisu with homemade ladyfingers and also mascarpone cream. I love how the matcha is perfectly balanced with the rich mascarpone, which I think makes this into the perfect matcha entremet. I hope you get the chance to make this amazing matcha tiramisu at home, and if you like my videos, make sure to subscribe. You can also check out my entremet cake playlist here. See you in the next video.